Hey there, everyone. So, I want to discuss a question that I saw in one of the pre med non traditional forums, of which there are a few out there. And it comes to career change. And the question would be, how do I do it? I mean, I have a full time job, I have a family, I don't even know where to begin. First place to begin, again, this is me kind of giving advice as to what I had done. It does not mean that you are going to be in the exact same position as me, nor is it going to be you doing the exact same things that I had to do or had to go through. Okay? Um, the first thing you need to do is realize what you're getting into. What you're getting into is a marathon, and by no means is this a sprint. What do I mean by a marathon? You're thinking, oh, it's going to be a few years. It's going to be more than a few years. To give you an idea, I started 2003 was when I made the decision that I wanted to go into medical school, or at least try to get into medical school. I was completing my first year or so of a master's degree. That was 2003. I completed all of my training in 2016. 13 years. That's what I mean by a marathon. And, well, you say, well, you were going for a master's. Well, I completed my master's degree because it was a thesis around 2005, 2006. So that was almost 4 years that it took me to do a master's, because I was doing my master's after work. I was a part-time student. And if you're like most non-traditionals that has a family, you have a full-time job. You have bills to pay, you have a mortgage to pay, you got to keep the power on, you know, kids, if they're old enough, have school things that they have to do, they have activities, spouse has requirements, people have to be fed, people have to be clothed. So you may not really be able to take the time off and do a master's program or special master's program or your prerequisites all within 1 year. In fact, I've heard this in the past from other people who are advising non-traditionals. The question is, do you want to get into medical school, or do you just want to get things done fast? Because if you get things done fast, the question is, are you going to succeed? Now remember, if you don't do well in your special master's program or in your prerequisites, you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot, because chances are you're going to put in all that effort and it's not going to yield any fruit. Rather, you're going to spend all that money and you have nothing to show for it. So you want to think to yourself, do I want to do this right, or do I want to do this fast? And I would suggest that you do it right. How can you do it right? Well, you have to see what's best for you. Do you have the ability to take the time out of work? Do you have the resources? Do you have the support to have no income or very little income in order to complete a special master's program and work and be a student for full time? Or do you have to work full time and do this part time? Because those are questions you have to answer, and only you can answer that question. You can say, what should I do, and go to these forums and say, what should I do? And the answer is, I don't know what you should do. This is what I did. And if anyone tells you this is what you should do, is really giving you really bad advice. Because again, what works for you might not necessarily have worked for them, and what worked for them can certainly not work for you. Everyone has their own very unique situation, their own unique requirements and abilities. So then other questions are, well, I already have a bachelor's degree in a science. Maybe I'll get a master's in public health. And the answer is that that's really not a good idea. I'll tell you why. Because medical schools want to see whether or not you can really succeed in the hard sciences. An MPH does not give you hard sciences. it's just simple. I got my master's in biology. I was taking biochemistry, and I took genetics, and I did a thesis, and that's the kind of coursework they want to see. So if you have that kind of background where you already have a bachelor's in biology or chemistry or something else, and you had missteps, the best thing to do is, meet with the pre-health advisor at your school. It doesn't matter if it was several years ago. I went to my pre-health committee of my undergraduate school. I graduated in 1997. I went to them in 2003. And we looked it over everything, and we talked about everything, and they gave me the advice. I didn't have to repeat my basic science courses, probably because I was working in science. At that point, I was already doing research in genetics and molecular biology. So it's not like I was out of the sciences and I would have to redo it. However, I did bring my transcript from my master's program, and they were hard sciences, and they pretty much said there's really no point in repeating the previous sciences. You're showing you're not the same person that you were before. When I graduated with a 2.56 from undergraduate, I wound up graduating graduate school with a 3.8, 3.7, 3.8. I took an economics course, which kind of brought my total GPA down. Unlike the rest of the people in my class, I decided not to cheat when the professor wasn't there for an exam. So, you have to look at your own situation individually and make a list. Pros on one side, cons on the other. And write every single question you have down. Can I do this full time? What's the pro? Pro is, you can even get it done. And that's the only thing that you can do, and that's the only thing that you're going to focus on, and you're not torn in multiple directions. The con is, you have no income, or you'll have to work part-time. So then the question then becomes is, where are you going to live? If you are currently living in a house, are you going to be able to make your mortgage payment? Are you married, and will your spouse be able to make those mortgage payments with little or nominal help from your income, right? Your kids, what are you going to do about them? At the time that I was studying, I had a new baby. She became my study buddy. And while my wife was sleeping, we agreed that if the baby woke up anytime between 6 p.m. and midnight, that I would do all the feedings because I was up anyway studying. I had her next to me. She was in her bassinet. And anytime after midnight, my wife would take care of it so I can get some rest and go to work. But you may not have that situation. You may not have any children whatsoever. You may have older children, which makes things a lot easier because that can actually make it fun because you can study together. So look at it from that perspective. What activities are you willing to sacrifice not going to? Because if you want to get into medical school, and if you do get into medical school, no one's life is going to stop. Your life is going to be put on hold while you're in school, but everyone else is just going to keep going. Your kids are going to go to the next grade. They're going to have their activities. Your spouse has to have their own life as if they were single. And you're not going to go to every single birthday party. You're not going to go to every single event because you might have an exam the next day and you have to study. And if you're putting all of this effort into this goal, then you have to be in it for the long haul. That should also go on your list. Pros and cons. Are you willing to make that sacrifice? If the answer is no, then this is not for you. You're not going to do it. Because when it comes to medical school, let me tell you something. I mean, things could certainly have changed. I went to medical school from 2007 to 2011, and every third week was a week of exams. I don't know how many family gatherings that I've missed because I was studying. I made sure that there were the activities of my children that I could go to, I could go. The ones that I felt were the most important: birthdays, graduations, certain activities in school. Especially if they were in the evening, I'd take a break from studying and go. But you may not be able to do that. And you have to see whether or not that's a sacrifice you're willing to make. If you're willing to make it, then do it. If you're not willing to make it, this is not for you. The other sacrifices are, you can't go on that vacation. You can't buy that brand new car. You have to buy a jalopy. Because if you do get into medical school, you're looking at an incredible amount of student debt. You want to reduce that. We've already kind of discussed that before. We can certainly discuss it again, maybe a little more detail of certain things. I think I've covered the subject pretty well. Let me know in the comments if you think I didn't, and you would appreciate a little more coverage in that. But you're gonna have to pay tuition to your SMP, to your master's degree, to your new undergraduate degree. You're not getting that Tesla. You're certainly not going on that cruise unless someone else pays for it and it's in between semesters and you have the time. You go on social media, you have to think, I don't care what other people are doing. I know that's really hard. And let me tell you something, one of the best things I did back in 2021, I deleted all my social media accounts. It was just not good for mental health, and with everything happening and the division going on, I just couldn't take it anymore. So I deleted it, and I've stopped caring what other people think. I'm not here to impress anyone. There's only 5 people in this world that I need to impress, and they all live in my house. So it doesn't matter to me if, my friends go on a 20-day cruise through the Mediterranean. Good for them. I was doing what I wanted to do, which was become a doctor. I can have my cruise later on. And we did. And you'll be in a position where it's not going to break the bank. So you have to think about whether or not you can live in the house that you're in, live in the apartment that you're in. Realistically, you really don't want to go into bankruptcy. That's going to affect your ability to get any kind of student loans later on. In addition, you want to make sure that you're not house poor. That's a big mistake a lot of people make. They become house poor. If your house is already paid for, make sure that you can pay for the quarterly tax statements. You may have to downsize. And that might actually be good for you because you can put that extra money in the bank. We lived in North Jersey, and we bought our house before the housing bubble in 99. And we sold right before the burst and right before the Great Recession. So we paid off all of our debts and we're able to put a nice down payment and bought a townhome. Wasn't the best thing, but our goal wasn't to get a doctor house. That was for later on. We have a doctor house now. But those are the things you have to question. If you're not married, you don't have any children or any other responsibilities, maybe you should get a roommate. Or maybe you should move back in with the folks for a couple of years. That way you reduce your expenses. I mean, you're doing something. It's not like you're living in your parents' basement because you're not going for a job, and you're going for this special master's program, going for this in an effort to improve your resume in order to get to medical school. But you have to have a plan B. What are you going to do with all this information if you don't get in? Because the SMP or the special master's program or your master's program, that's only a small, very small piece of the puzzle. You have other pieces of the puzzle. And I'm sure things have changed, but you still have to take the MCAT. The MCAT's still required. It's not going to be like the SAT where it's going to be optional. I can't see that happening in the short term or the long term. But you have to dedicate that time to study for the MCAT. This is not a test where you study a weekend. This is not a test where you say, well, I'm taking the classes, that's kind of me studying. No, 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 no. Not at all. This is a test of critical thinking. It's not like they're going to say, here's a reading passage, and then ask you a question and you can find the information in the reading passage. No, that's the SAT. Right? The MCAT's going to ask you, based on what you have read, can you take that information, mush it in your brain, and apply it somewhere else? It's a test of critical thinking, because that's what you're going to have to wind up doing, thinking very critically. You're going to have to think multiple steps ahead, and this is what I tell my residents all the time, going from medical student to intern, going from intern to resident, going from resident to attending. You have to think about these different ways on how you're going to think, because a medical student is thinking on how to pass the exam. An intern is thinking on how to finish all their notes and see everyone before rounds. A resident is thinking, do I want to go into fellowship or do I want to work? But the attending, you know what? You know, it ends with you. You're the one that's making all the final decisions. You're the one that has to have an appropriate differential when the patient comes in. And what if they don't talk? You gotta think really outside the box. So it's a test of critical thinking, getting the information, understanding the information, and then applying it somewhere else. You know, it certainly could have changed since I last took the MCAT, which was 2005, 2006, but by then it was still written, and it was still only out of 45. And after that, you then have to do your applications. And you have to start writing essays. So the first essay, your first personal statement is, why do you want to become a doctor? I want to help people. Yeah, no shit. Everyone who goes into medicine wants to help people. That's what they say. A lot of people want to go for the lifestyle. Watch the movie Gross Anatomy. Very funny. Daphne Zuniga was in it. Matthew McConaughey was in it. Not Matthew McConaughey. Daphne Zuniga was definitely in it, and Matthew Modine. Funny movie. Definitely not realistic, except maybe the first part where they ask, why do you want to become a doctor? You know, really tell me the truth. He's like, I want to be rich. And that's why some people go into it. So don't give me this, I want to help people stuff. Yeah, we know that, but what is it specifically about medicine that makes you want to help people? You know, why not be a police officer or a fireman? That's my boss back there. She's getting her work.
Sorry.
So you have to ask yourself, you know, you have to prepare for that exam. And it's not just the material, but you have to learn how to take that exam, right? It's timed. Why are they asking you that question? What is the purpose of this particular question? What is the purpose of the information in the stem of the question that can help you? First time I took it after, I had to relearn all of the stuff. So I graduated from college in 1997. I had to relearn general biology, general chemistry, organic chemistry, and physics by the time I took the MCAT. Again. One thing I didn't do was practice test taking. And I wound up guessing on about 60 questions, 20 in each section, because I didn't practice my test taking and my timing techniques. I wound up being very anal when I retook the MCAT for the final time. And I made myself a schedule. Again, remember, this is what I did. This is not what you have to do, but it's just a suggestion. So I made myself a schedule. I did Kaplan. I did Kaplan online. I did not go to a class. Again, I had a family. I had a full-time job. I was also going to graduate school, so I didn't have the time to go to an extra class. So this is when Panera was the only place that really offered free Wi-Fi. So I would get there at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. I would open it, and then I would do my lecture. I would do the lesson, and then I'd go home at 1 p.m. 1 p.m. was family time. We did things Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. During my Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I would do the quizzes that they suggest that they wanted me to do on my way to work because I was commuting by bus. I would review the questions, but I did something different. I looked at each question, each answer, and I made sure I got the answer right for the correct reason, not because it was a lucky guess. Sorry. Sorry about that. But rather, I also made sure that I also wanted to see why I got the question wrong, and then learn from it. And I've taken that every step of the way. And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I prepped for the next lesson, which was Sunday. That's the way it was done. And I wound up going up 7 points in less than 6 months, which is unheard of. And I wound up getting 4 interviews and 2 acceptances. These are the things that you're going to have to do. If this is what you really want, then you're going to have to make those sacrifices, and you're going to be willing to make those sacrifices, but you have to have buy-in from your family. You know, from your spouse is the most important thing, because they're the ones that are going to have to take over where you can't. So, that's all I have for now. We can continue this conversation later. Let me know in the comments below if you want to continue this conversation or have any other ideas for other conversations you want us to have. Subscribe. And I'll see you next time.